Have you ever come back from a trip with that strange feeling that something didn't quite add up, even though you did everything right, took great photos, and lived moments that looked incredible? That question is uncomfortable because it touches something most people don't like to face. For many, a trip that looks like freedom was actually born as debt. This feels normal, but it isn't. There's a belief that gets repeated almost automatically, that traveling is always an investment in experiences, no matter the cost. It sounds beautiful, mature, even smart, but almost no one notices this part. When the decision is impulsive, driven by comparison and the urgency to show that you're living, the real cost isn't the flight or the hotel, it's what comes after. And this is where the game starts to change. Notice how it really begins. Not at the airport, not with a packed suitcase. It starts in that quiet moment when you open your banking app, see the available credit and think, I can split this into payments. The purchase comes with a rush, euphoria, immediate relief, a sense of winning. Your mind is already projecting the photos, the stories, the comments. Your brain isn't calculating interest or future installments. It's buying, belonging, validation, the feeling of momentum. If this sounds familiar, stay with me. During the trip, everything seems to confirm that the decision was right. The images look good, the setting helps, the story feels perfect. From the outside, people see freedom, lightness, success, but almost no one sees the most important detail. That experience isn't being lived just for you. It's being lived to be shown. And when that happens, something quietly shifts. The trip stops being rest and turns into performance. You do feel pleasure, but it's mixed with anxiety, with the need to prove it was worth it. The problem is that the brain loves this moment and completely ignores the future. Payments are pushed to later. Financial decisions are postponed, and the real impact gets numbed by the emotion of now. This feels normal, but it isn't. It's a very common financial behavior pattern, especially in a life that mostly exists on Instagram. And almost no one notices that while the digital life seems to move forward, real financial life stays stuck. The most uncomfortable part doesn't happen during the trip. It happens when you get back, when the movement ends, when the photos are already posted, when routine returns exactly as it was before. Except now there's one new detail, invisible to everyone else but very present to you, the credit card statement. The payments arrive one by one, and with them comes a feeling that's hard to explain. It's not clear regret, it's quieter than that. A question that shows up in the background of your mind. Was it really worth it? Almost no one talks about this out loud, because admitting it hurts more than paying. Admitting it means recognizing that, at some point, the decision wasn't about living more, but about looking like you were living. And when that realization starts to surface, the relationship between travel, money, and freedom no longer feels so simple. This is where the story starts to go deeper, and maybe you begin to see that the problem was never the destination, but what made you press the buy button in the first place. And when that question starts showing up, it rarely comes alone. It pulls others in behind it. Questions you may never have put into words, but that were always there, waiting for a bit of space to surface. At what point did traveling stop being a conscious choice and start feeling like a quiet obligation? When did that sense of freedom begin to depend more on other people's reactions than on the experience itself? Almost no one talks about this openly, but a lot of people feel it. And feeling it, believe it or not, isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign that clarity is starting to form. Maybe as you're listening right now, a specific memory popped into your mind, a trip, a purchase, a decision that felt right in the moment, but took on a different weight over time. If any of this is landing for you, I'd really appreciate it if you left a comment about what hit you the most so far, not as an empty vent, but as a way of putting language to something so many people carry in silence. When someone writes, "I went through that," other people read it and realize they're not alone. And that's how this kind of conversation actually becomes powerful. And in the same way, if this reflection connects with your real life, liking the video is a simple way to keep this topic alive. It's not about cold numbers. It's about telling the platform this matters, that there are real people on the other side, trying to understand their relationship with money, choices, and social pressure. And if you feel like this kind of content helps you notice patterns you used to miss, subscribing to the channel is almost a natural continuation of this conversation. It's a way of saying, I want to keep exploring this. Because from here, what starts to reveal itself isn't just about trips or isolated debt. It's about a deeper pattern, one that connects behavior, comparison, and financial decisions made on autopilot. A pattern that looks harmless at first, but slowly shapes your choices without asking permission. And that's exactly where it's worth going a little deeper, calmly, without easy answers, to understand what's really happening underneath that constant need to look like you're living. Now, I want to go even deeper into this because there's a detail that completely changes how these trips are experienced, and almost no one notices it while it's happening. The real driver behind many of these decisions isn't rest, curiosity, or a genuine desire to explore something new. It's validation, that quiet need to confirm, to yourself and to others, that your life is moving forward, evolving, making sense. The human brain is extremely sensitive to signals of belonging. For most of our history, being part of the group was a matter of survival. The problem is that on social media, this ancient mechanism now operates in a distorted environment. Likes, comments, and views turn into artificial signals of acceptance, and the brain doesn't really tell the difference. It reads them as real approval, as value, as status. This seems harmless, but it isn't. This is where mindset starts being shaped without us noticing. In that context, traveling stops being an internal experience and becomes an external project. Before it even happens, it's already being lived in advance, not through sensations but through reactions. The mind rehearses what will be posted, imagines who will see it, calculates the impact. The pleasure isn't in the quiet of the place, the rest of the body, or being fully present. It's in the expectation of digital feedback. And when that happens, something subtle breaks. The experience exists more as proof than as lived reality. Notice how everything turns performative. The right photo at the right angle at the right time. A caption designed to look spontaneous, but carefully constructed. Even moments that could be simple start carrying an invisible tension. Document, show, validate. Rest becomes a task. Freedom turns into an obligation, and almost no one asks why. Because on the outside, everything looks normal, even beautiful, but on the inside, the journey starts to lose depth. What's most curious is that real pleasure decreases while anxiety increases, because the mind isn't in the present. It's backstage, watching its own image, measuring impact, comparing responses. That creates a strange feeling that's hard to name. You're there, but not fully. You live the moment while observing yourself living it. And that comes with an emotional and financial cost that rarely shows up on the surface. The hidden truth is that when validation becomes fuel, decisions stop being conscious. They start responding to external stimuli. Money then enters as a tool to sustain that narrative, not because there's abundance, but because there's urgency to maintain an image. This is a quiet shift in how choices are made, a change in behavior that happens without announcement, without warning, without prior reflection. Maybe you're recognizing this pattern right now. Maybe a specific memory surfaced because all of this felt a little too familiar. If that's the case, leave a comment saying, "This makes sense to me," because recognizing this doesn't end the conversation. It simply opens space to see what comes before the decision and the impact it keeps generating long after the trip is over. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because it's exactly in the return that the story changes tone. Even though almost no one admits it out loud, the trip is over. The plane lands, the suitcase goes back to the corner of the room, the photos are already posted. The stories that felt so important yesterday disappear within 24 hours. The likes slow down, the comments stop, the external noise fades quickly. But one thing remains, the statement. It's a quiet moment, almost invisible to anyone on the outside. You go back to work, fall into the routine again, sit in the same chair, face the same problems as before, except now there's a new detail behind the scenes. Less financial margin, less breathing room, less space for mistakes. Real life looks almost the same, but it's carrying extra weight that never shows up in a photo. This sounds like an exaggeration, but it isn't. This is where the impact actually starts to be felt. Regret doesn't arrive like a shock. It doesn't announce itself. It settles in slowly, disguised as small tensions, a slight discomfort when you open your banking app, an unexpected irritation when an unplanned expense pops up, a tight feeling when you realize those payments will still be with you for months. And what's most interesting is that, even while feeling this, many people keep telling themselves it was worth it. Not because they're sure, but because admitting the opposite hurts more than paying. There's a hidden truth in this moment. The brain prefers to rationalize rather than acknowledge an emotional mistake. Admitting it means facing the fact that the decision didn't deliver the promised transformation, that the feeling of freedom was brief, that the lasting impact wasn't positive. And that threatens the image a person has built of themselves as someone who makes good choices, so the mind creates justifications. Everyone does this. At least I lived. I'll deal with it later. It brings temporary relief, but it doesn't solve anything. Meanwhile, the financial journey starts to shift in subtle ways. Future decisions are made under pressure. The credit card doesn't have the same room. Money that could ease other parts of life is now tied to something that already belongs to the past. And here a hard-to-explain tension appears. You're not paying for the trip itself, you're paying for its echo, for something that no longer exists, but still takes up space in your decisions. Almost no one shows this side. On social media, the return never appears. There's no photo of the statement, no caption about the quiet squeeze, no story about financial anxiety. And that creates a collective distortion. It feels like you're the only one who goes through this, like you're the only one who came back, different. But the reality is that many people are living the exact same backstage, just in complete silence. That silence is dangerous because it blocks reflection. It normalizes choices that should, at the very least, be questioned. And when regret can't be acknowledged, it doesn't turn into learning, it turns into weight. A weight that influences future decisions, shapes mindset, and quietly accumulates without warning. This is where understanding what really happened stops being about the trip and becomes about something bigger, deeper, about how choices are made when no one is watching. If, while listening to this, a specific situation came to mind, leave a comment saying, "This makes sense to me," because recognizing this silent return doesn't end the story. It simply opens space to see what keeps repeating long after the trip is over. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because when you connect all these points, a pattern starts to emerge, one that's rarely seen as a pattern. At first glance, each trip looks like an isolated decision, almost innocent. A desire here, a promotion there, a need to clear your head. But underneath it all, there's an invisible cycle operating behind the scenes, guiding decisions without asking permission. And when that cycle repeats, it stops being an exception and starts shaping a person's entire financial journey. It usually begins with frustration, not the explosive kind that's easy to recognize, but a quiet, accumulated frustration. The feeling of being stuck while others seem to be moving forward. The sense that life has lost color, rhythm, novelty. Instead of facing that discomfort, a quick solution appears: traveling, not as a conscious choice, but as a temporary escape. The trip comes in as emotional anesthesia, immediate relief for something that was never addressed at the source. The problem is that this anesthesia doesn't heal anything, it only pauses the pain for a few days. And to work quickly, it almost always comes with impulsivity, payment plans, stretched credit, decisions made in the heat of the moment. While the mind distracts itself with the promise of freedom, debt quietly starts to form. Nothing blows up right away. In fact, everything feels under control. It's only later, on the return, that the emotional and financial bill begins to show up. With less margin, less security, and more pressure, the original frustration comes back, sometimes stronger. After all, the trip didn't bring the transformation that was expected. The routine stays the same, except now it carries extra financial commitments. And at this point, something curious happens. Instead of questioning the cycle, many people try to compensate. They work more, push themselves harder, feel even more trapped, until the mind, tired once again, looks for another quick exit, and the cycle restarts. Frustration, impulsive travel, debt, more frustration. This sequence keeps repeating, creating the illusion of movement. Because on Instagram, everything looks like progress. New places, new photos, new stories. Digital life is always moving, but behind the screen, real financial life stays frozen, out of breath, with no room for strategic choices, no clarity. It's an inverted transformation, a lot of external stimulation, very little internal growth. The hidden truth is that this cycle isn't about liking or disliking travel. It's about decisions made to soothe emotions that are never named, about a mindset that confuses a change of scenery with a change of life. And as long as this pattern isn't recognized, it keeps operating behind the scenes, influencing choices, draining energy, and postponing any real sense of progress. Maybe you're starting to see this pattern now, not as judgment but as revelation, because understanding the cycle is the first step toward realizing that the issue isn't the trip itself, but the role it has come to play. If this resonated with you on any level, leave a comment, saying I'm on this journey too. Recognizing the pattern doesn't end the path, it simply prepares the ground for something different to begin. Now, I want to go even deeper into this, because when you place all of this side by side, one question remains, and it doesn't come with a comfortable answer. It's a question that doesn't accuse, but it exposes. If no one were watching, if there were no stories, likes, or external expectations, would you still take this trip in the same way? The simple fact that this question creates silence already says a lot, not because traveling is wrong, but because the reason behind the decision is rarely as clear as it seems. That question is unsettling because it cuts through the surface and goes straight to mindset. It forces you to look at the backstage of your own decisions, to notice how many choices were made without an internal audience, only an external one in mind. And almost no one was taught to distinguish genuine desire from social impulse. Life moves too fast, the stimuli are constant, and the feeling of falling behind pushes decisions that seem small but carry cumulative impact. There's a quiet belief that the problem is about overdoing it or lacking self-control, but that explanation is too simple. The hidden truth is more uncomfortable. Often the urge to travel isn't born from the desire to experience something new, but from the urgency to prove that life isn't standing still. It's an attempt to internally compensate for something that wasn't resolved externally. And as long as that origin isn't questioned, the pattern keeps repeating, just dressed differently each time. Notice how this shifts the focus of the conversation. It's not about cutting out travel or living a restricted life without pleasure. It's about understanding what's being numbed, because when a trip becomes proof of existence, it carries a responsibility no experience should have to bear. It starts holding up an entire narrative. And no narrative can carry that weight for long without demanding something in return. Maybe real transformation isn't about changing destinations, but about changing the point of departure, about noticing when a decision comes from desire and when it comes from comparison, about recognizing that not every external movement represents internal progress. This awareness doesn't solve everything, but it changes how the next decisions are made, and that alone already shifts the impact of the journey. What's most interesting is that once this question starts echoing, it doesn't stay limited to travel. It spreads into other areas: purchases, goals, career choices, everyday habits. Everything begins to be observed with a bit more honesty. Not to punish yourself, but to see more clearly. And clarity always comes before change, even when that change doesn't yet have a defined shape. If this question has been resonating with you, if at some point you caught yourself thinking, I'd never looked at it this way before, leave a comment saying, this makes sense to me. Because giving this doubt a name doesn't end the conversation. It simply opens space to understand where that constant need to look like you're living really comes from, and what happens when you start looking at it without filters. If you've made it this far, it's because this conversation touched something real in your own journey. And when that happens, it's worth continuing. Subscribing to the channel isn't a commitment. It's simply a quiet way to keep going deeper into this kind of reflection, without formulas, without empty promises, just clarity around the decisions we make on autopilot and almost never question. If it feels right for you, leave a comment saying, this message was meant for me, or I'm with you to the end. It's not about writing something polished, it's just a sign of presence. When someone comments that, others who are living through the same inner conflict realize they're not alone. And that's how this kind of conversation truly gains strength. And if this video helped you notice something that used to go unseen, liking the video is a quiet way to keep this space open. It won't change your life overnight, but it helps this kind of content keep reaching the people who need to hear this exact kind of reflection. There's a video right here that directly complements everything we've talked about, going even deeper into the backstage of decisions that seem simple, but carry much more beneath the surface. Click it and keep going with me over there. The journey doesn't end here, it's just starting to become clearer.